Welcome. I'm Nathalie Ferrier. I'm Higgins Art Gallery Director. Thank you so much for being with us today. First, I want to wish you all a wonderful Valentine's, happy Valentine's to every one of you. So before we start, I would like to let you know that the event is being recorded. Also, you may use the chat button at any time for your comments and questions, and we will answer them at the end of the event. Tide, Art Faculty and Guests is a mixed media exhibit which includes 4 Cape Cod Community College Art Faculty members, Brooke, Mullins, Doherty, Sara Ringler, Vicky Tomayko, and myself. Our guests are Sean Cassidy, Claudia Smith-Jacobs, Alyssa, Laurel, Ringler, and Bert Yarborough. In this time of isolation, we as artists feel more than ever the need to connect to a larger world. This exhibit aims at creating bridges between communities by telling true stories that reflect upon our own lives and our own history. So now let's watch the video and the art. Thank you. So the wonderful music you could hear while we were watching the art was played by the Four Seas Jazz Combo, and they played on December 2nd. We had a special reception in the gallery and we had special music for us. And now it's my pleasure. I would like to introduce the artist Claudia Smith-Jacobs. Claudia is a painter of mood and a voice for social justice. Her paintings are deliberately dark, enigmatic, mysterious, and haunting. Multiculturalism has shaped both the art and the life of the artist. She's a multi-ethnic person. So she's Asian American, Cherokee, French, African American, and Scottish Irish. She speaks English, French, Portuguese, and has traveled extensively. After studying political science at Boston University, Claudia was accepted into the graduate program in African Studies at UCLA. Subsequently, she trained at Georgetown University for admission into the US Peace Corps Brazil. After 2 years in Brazil, she returned to the United States to complete a master's degree at Lesley University, followed by a certificate in Portuguese language and culture at the Universidade dos Açores in Portugal. Claudia Smith-Jacobs created the Portuguese language special education programs both in Cambridge and the Barnstable Public Schools. She has studied art in France, in England, and as well at the School of Museum and Fine Arts in Boston, the Cambridge Adult Education Center, the Cape Cod Art Association, the Provincetown Art Association, and at the Cotuit Center for the Arts. So Claudia currently teaches at the Falmouth Art Center. Welcome, Claudia.
Thank you so much, Nathalie. Wonderful introduction. My pleasure to be here. The first collage that we're going to look at is called Generations. It's a very large collage. It's about 4 feet by 5 feet, and it's of my mother and myself. And I used tiny family photos, about 5 inches by 7 inches, and enlarged them over and over and over again. The baby is me, and the adult face is divided in half. So half of it is my face, and the other half is my mother's face. My father is also in the collage. If you look very closely, you can see that the baby's dress is made up of mathematical equations. Well, my dad was a scientist at MIT Draper Lab, and his team created the instrumentation for the Apollo flight to the moon. This collage is about family, heritage, tradition, and strength. Now we're going to look at a few more slides of my work. Some are in the Higgins Art Gallery exhibit that you just saw, and some are not. All of them were sparked by events that grabbed my attention and wouldn't let go. The first two slides, slides 2A and 2B, show an assemblage. It's a huge collage which addresses the question, are we still fighting the Civil War? And my answer is absolutely yes. Let's look quickly at those first two slides. Next, the next 3 slides deal with systemic racism and are all in the genre of my painting in the gallery entitled Remember Our Names, the one of the tall woman with her arms crossed. So let's look at slide number 3 and slides number 4, and both of them are hands up, don't shoot. And they look at the horrible number of people of color who have been shot in the course of police arrests. Let's look now at the next slide, slide number 5. And now slide number 6. This one is about mood, but it's also, as you look at it, white skin is not white and black skin is not black. We as painters know that. You can't take out a tube of titanium white and paint a person. That's a false dichotomy designed to divide. So this painting is a tribute to the lovely colors, the range of colors in brown skin. Human skin color across all ethnicities ranges from light to medium to dark, from ivory to darkest brown, with subtle undertones of pink or yellow or red, and sometimes even blue, olive green, gray, and black. Slide number 7 is called Sandy Hook. Again, this is a very, very large collage, which combines text and paint and torn remnants of the newspaper articles which covered the massacre. The collage pauses on the duality of good and evil that dwells in the same human being. Let's look at slide number 8. The last 4 artworks that you're going to look at spotlight the key roles played by African Americans, Wampanoags, Cape Verdeans, and Azorians in 3 major Cape Cod industries: whaling, strawberry farming, and cranberry harvesting. As you're looking at slide number 8, called A Whaling We Will Go, the young man in the suit with the hat, I first painted this canvas horizontally. And in person, you can see that there's a whole landscape of violent seas, rowboats, whales, and whalers. And then I flipped the painting and finished it on the vertical axis. Next, slide number 9. This is a collage of Emerald House, the strawberry farm founded in Falmouth in 1906 by an Azorian family. And the slide number 10, this is a painting that I did in tribute to Falmouth's cranberry harvesters. On it, I inscribed the following text: knee deep in freezing water, aching fingers, toes, backs, bees buzzing, mosquitoes biting, brown bodies harvesting cranberries for Thanksgiving dinners on strangers' tables. And the last slide, slide number 11, this last painting is an oil entitled The Last Cranberry Bog in Falmouth. Shortly after I painted this scene, the shed was demolished, the bog was abandoned, and now it is returned to scrubland. What you see in the painting no longer exists. Thank you for watching. And now it's my pleasure to present Sara Ringler. Sara David Ringler is a professional printmaker and art professor, and she's been at Cape Cod Community College for 27 years, teaching drawing, printmaking, design, book arts, and paper making. She is a graduate of the State University of New York in Buffalo, and she earned her master's in fine arts and design at the University of Massachusetts in Dartmouth. Sara enjoys the interaction between creating art and teaching art. She is the mother of 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren, and has lived on Cape Cod with her husband Neil for almost 50 years. Image making for her is a way to communicate and reflect. Primarily an abstract artist, her work is inspired by nature and the human condition. She balances and layers multiple forms and various processes to create a rich texture of image. Sara's work explores and denounces the exploitation of people, animals, and the environment. Her artwork is shown locally and internationally and can be seen in the upcoming exhibit at the Katuitt Center for the Arts in the Printmakers of Cape Cod's 45th anniversary exhibition in March. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you, Claudia. It is so nice to be in this exhibition with all of you and to see the variety of passions that everybody follows. And it is my pleasure to be here. The opening reception for this was more people than I was with for 2.5 years. So that was an extraordinary experience to see the Higgins Art Gallery filled with people and the cafeteria and the lobby, and what a gala event that was. So it is my pleasure to be here with students and my family and friends, and how wonderful it is to connect and to share what we do during such challenging times. And the arts do prevail. So share with you in my studio here. I love to work large, and I love color, and my work is inspired by so many different things. The processes that I use a lot of fluid movement of materials, channeling the energy of the elements, and in concert with my human intervention. It is this balance of external and internal forces that interest me. My artwork often reflects the sense of entitlement we as a species have laid on our environment and the people and the resources that we continue to exploit. I'm one small voice channeling the forces of nature. It's something I can control and something that is beyond me. And Claudia already talked about the industries that on the Cape have been the source of exploitation of people and continuing now to exploit nature with the devastation of particularly the right whale. And this is a print that's a captain's log and a transfer drawing. And this piece is art at the interface, and it is an accordion book, which is shows the rack line where the seaweed comes together with the water. It is a cyanotype and also has charts. And I love the form that it can change depending on how you want to experience it. And this is a book, loosely a book. Book arts has broadened into a really enormous channeling of the artistic expression. And this is a box that has a stone. Again, the application of the stone to be the handle for the box. And what I love about this is how it can be manipulated. And so this is the whale that is trapped within. And this is another book construction. It is comprised of shells and string and woodcuts and charts and transfer drawings. I love variety. And the structure itself is foam core and balsa wood, and it shows whales and the entanglement that is occurring now. And it also is something that moves and can be presented in a variety of different ways, and mixed media and whales and woodcuts and transfer drawings. I like the intimacy of being able to move that in different directions. And this is Harvest Moon. It's a monotype, collected seaweed at Sandy Neck, and then inked up a plate, created a stencil, and there's a lot of variations I've created with this because I can't control exactly where the seaweed is going to go. And so it gives me that sense of movement and the energy and the forces of nature. And these are blocks that are created with paper, and they include text and printmaking. They're colorful, and they're also playful. And this line comes from a poem written by my aunt, Tanya. Thank you. And now I do have the pleasure of introducing a special person in my life. My other kids might be listening. I'd like to introduce Alyssa, Laurel Ringler. She comes from a family of artists, a constant source of inspiration in her practice. She is an interdisciplinary artist with a focus in communication, action, and technology. Whether it is through photography, book arts, interactive digital design, or printmaking, Alyssa approaches each project as a communication equation that could be solved or at very least revealed. She received a BFA in photography from the University of Colorado at Boulder. She studied art in Florence, Italy, and received an MFA in studio art from the Maine College of Art in Portland. Over the last 12 years, she's grown her photography business, Crown Inking Studio in New York City, and now calls Vermont home with uninterrupted nature in lieu of city life. Alyssa, welcome.
I'm honored to be a part of the show, and I just want to mark this moment as being quite special to be introduced by my mom for a show that we're both in. We all have many stories to tell, and as an artist, I feel grateful to be able to tell some of my stories through art, especially during this pandemic, during periods of isolation, confusion, and hardship. Everywhere I have lived, finding community has always been super important to me. But as a lot of you know, art can be a very solitary act. Often, where I have lived has inspired work that attempts to elicit a sense of place. When I feel connected to an environment, I feel a more solid foundation to build community. In a recent show at the Kittuit Center for the Arts, I presented City Forest, an installation made of forged birch bark and string, hand printed with abstract cityscapes. This piece encompasses two themes in my pandemic life: the city and the forest, my Brooklyn to Vermont transition, a conflation of skyscrapers and soaring trees. This installation moves with the current of those who walk past it, an ode to the constant movement of the city and the airflow necessary for survival during this pandemic. I relocated to Vermont from Brooklyn during this first lockdown, which then of course turned into much longer. After months of being in Vermont, I returned to my apartment in Brooklyn to collect some belongings, only to find an enormous stack of Sunday New York Times against my front door. I created this book from the pile of newspapers, and like City Forest, Sunday Times has an element of movement built into it. Yet when put together, stands testament to the heartbreaking stories.
Alyssa, there's something going on with your microphone.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, I think maybe it's when you move.
Okay, then we'll stay still. Thanks, Natalie.
Sorry.
This brings us to my work that is in Tide, and an example of when art is an extraordinary tool to connect. Gayutaku is a practice which dates back several hundred years and is the traditional method Japanese fishermen use to record their catch. It is still a method used today around the world, and more recently, it is used as an art form. Using the Gayutaku process provided me a deeper connection to where I'm from and what Cape Cod is made of. Fishermen are tied to the identity of Cape Cod through fishing. It should be noted here that making the Gayutaku prints would not be possible without this collaboration with the men who fished this majestic fish. These people make a living putting countless hours and painstaking physical labor into one of the most highly regulated fisheries in the world. And although the industry is not without controversy, it is part of the economy and community here on Cape Cod. This tail came from an 8-foot tuna fished by rod and reel in Cape Cod Bay. Here I have inked it up after freezing it. I painted directly on the tail, and then with the flexibility of the Japanese rice paper, wrapped, pushed, and pressed to evenly distribute the ink. And here's just a short time lapse of that process. As the tail began to thaw, slight changes in the details became evident as the tail held the ink differently. And you can see that in the difference between this print and this one. In this video, I've made a cyanotype by placing the Gayutaku print directly on paper, coated with cyanotype solution, and then tightly sandwiched it between 2 pieces of plexiglass. It was exposed to direct sunlight for about 45 minutes. There was actually enough contrast from the Gayutaku print to get a beautiful and detailed image. Here you see the cyanotype coming out of the clean water rinse and being put into a water and hydrogen peroxide mix, which will bring out those deep indigo blues that cyanotype is known for. And in case you missed in the beginning or didn't see the show, these are the pieces that are in Tide, and it's 2 Gayutaku prints on rice paper and a cyanotype. Thank you so much for your time and sharing in this event. So now I have the honor of introducing our next artist, Vicky Tomayko. And I truly am honored, as I was introduced to Vicky's work almost 20 years ago, and I've always loved and connected to it. It's very exciting to be hanging on the same walls together. Vicky is a teaching artist who makes prints and paintings and has recently started a series of tunnel books. Her work can be seen at the Schoolhouse Gallery in Provincetown and at AIR Gallery in Brooklyn, New York. She teaches at Cape Cod Community College in the youth program at Provincetown Art Association and Museum, and manages the print studio at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. She lives in Truro in a house she built with the help of many, and is happy to be in a rural setting near the sea with Bucky, Strummer, and Bert.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm going to share my screen. I was born in Detroit in 1955, and I lived there until my early 20s. Many members of my family still live in the surrounding suburbs, but no one lives within the city limits where I grew up, went to school, and worked for the US Post Office before heading off to study art in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Oops. There we go. As a substitute letter carrier, I had the opportunity to see many neighborhoods throughout the city in Detroit. And this series of monoprints came about after a trip to Detroit in the fall of 2013. It was a trip to attend my niece's wedding, but I spent a few days exploring the city and visiting places from my past. At that time, there were many abandoned buildings. A common feature in the interiors and on the surrounding property of these places were the presence of empty shopping carts and wheeled carriers. I saw decaying equipment whose functions I found mysterious. Surrounding neighborhoods that had been filled with houses were empty, and the dwellings had been removed. There was evidence of farming and these vacant lots, and hence a rebirth. But it still gave me a forlorn feeling as I remembered what had once been thriving neighborhoods alive with people who offered me drinks of water as I walked and delivered their mail. Another place I visited was an island park in the Detroit River called Belle Isle. As a young child and adult, I canoed, skated on the canals, rode bicycles, visited the aquarium and the conservatory, and enjoyed days there filled with friends and food. The park was once well cared for, and enjoyment was free to all. It was well respected for the pleasures it provided, but urban decay hit Belle Isle with a vengeance, and little of its grandeur remained in 2013 during my visit. But there were glimmers of hope in the form of community involvement and reclamation. I did a series of months of the year about the fishless aquarium. There were no fish there when I visited, but the people were restoring the building and restoring the fish tanks so that fish could be reintroduced into the aquarium. Though my family was working class and we all had to work hard, I was afforded many opportunities not available to everyone in the city. I can remember discriminatory practices that ran deep within the fabric of society. My reactions to the visit in 2013 are symbolized by the works here. The empty carts and structures without purpose are telling, and the empty aquarium tanks are waiting for something good to happen. The rainbows are a call to all to consider diversity as the best way forward. The works are moody, but are meant to be hopeful. These monoprints are a selection from a series that took an entire year to complete. I think one of these monoprints has a small amount of collage, but everything else is painstakingly printed from plates rolled with color, most often one color at a time, and printed onto BFK Reeves paper using an etching press. The textures that you see in these monoprints are made by a gum Arabic transfer process that uses a laser copy as a printing plate. This process allowed me to print the patterns of the insides of security envelopes, a reference and a tribute to the post office job that took me to neighborhoods across the city. And with that, I have the pleasure to introduce my partner in life, Bert Yarborough, who is zooming in from downstairs. Bert has a degree in architecture from Clemson University and an MFA in photography from the University of Iowa. He held the Sonia C. Davidow 56 Endowed Chair in the Fine and Performing Arts at Colby Sawyer College, New London, New Hampshire, where he also served as the director of the William and Sonia Carlson Davidow and Marion Graves Mugar Art Galleries, and taught drawing and painting. A former 2-year fellow at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, He served as Visual Arts Program Coordinator for 4 years and as Chairman of the Visual Committee and member of the Board of Trustees. He has received 2 New Hampshire State Arts Council grants in painting, an NEA Fellowship in Sculpture, and a Fulbright Fellowship to Nigeria, also in sculpture. He is currently represented by the Bert Yarborough Gallery in Provincetown and resides in Truro.
Thank you, Vicky. Happy Valentine's Day to my partner, Vicky, as well as to all of you out there. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here and to, let's see what we got here. There we go. To share some work with you. Get this going. So to put my work in context, I came to Provincetown, as Vicky stated in my biography, in 1976, but I grew up in Miami, Florida, so I spent a lot of time at the beach. When I came to Provincetown, I felt that I was home. I spent a lot of time here out at Herring Cove and Hatches Harbor, where there are these beautiful inlets which create this kind of incredible visual language. And the marks of the water, the light, the sea, the clouds, these are things that I've been drawing and kind of dwelling in for over 40 years now. This would be one of my studios in the summer, which is a great place to have a studio. I would go out, pack a lunch, spend the day drawing and swimming. And so the kind of ground for my work has been the National Seashore, Herring Cove, Hatches Harbor, now out here in Truro, Fisher's Beach and the Cape Cod Bay. As many of you know, it's a spectacular place to live. This is a shot of the work that's at the gallery. The tall piece in the middle of this shot was a piece that I made in 1976 when I came as a fellow. I spent a lot of time walking the beaches, and I had just started working outdoors, picking up objects, picking up lobster pot stuff and rope from traps, and just collecting all these things and moving through the environment. And so it's the earliest piece in the exhibit that I put up. The rest of the pieces all come from experiences that I had in Nigeria when I was there on a Fulbright in 1983 and 84. But this piece was also done when I was a fellow. It's a piece called Secret. It's made of driftwood and basket reed, and it formed some of the material that I used on these indoor pieces later. I would construct these pieces over a series of months, refashioning them and going out and drawing and spending basically from sunup to sundown out in the National Seashore. This is another piece called Spill. These are all located in little small cranberry bogs. And I would put them out there and let them weather for a while, but I would always take them down when they started to collapse. But the weather and the elements forced me to keep going out there and restructuring and rebuilding. So this is that piece, again, that I also did during that time period. And the piece on the far right and these other pieces were done after I came back from Nigeria with a Fulbright to study traditional Yoruban sculpture. It was one of the most amazing experiences I've had in my life. I lived there for a year, studied with a 4th generation carver, and went over as a sculptor, but kind of came back as a painter. We had a lot of downtime, and this was the piece that I worked on and carved for basically the entire year that I was there. It's a 2-headed snake. It's about 4.5 feet long and made from Nigerian mahogany. And these pieces were constructed after I came back using the basket reed and paper, and then glue and acrylic, and then I would begin to paint on them. And they're different shaped pieces. covered with many coats of paper to give it a kind of flexible structure. And then I would work on them. That one's about 5 feet high. This one is a smaller piece, about 3 or 4 feet. They reflect some of the work that I did out in the dunes, but also some of my architectural heritage. I would use an erasing shield that architects use to erase marks, to often use as a stencil to make marks. It's another piece, Snake Dream, and it's about, roughly 5 feet high and about 24, 28 inches wide. And again, this is reed and dowels and paper and acrylic paint. Another piece, about 3.5 feet high. And I wanted to show this piece again. It's called Lamidi's Dream. Lamidi Fakai was my carving teacher. He was a 4th generation carver. And I spent the year apprenticing to him, basically. We would have to go almost to the edge of the forest to pick out a tree, talk about the tree, have the tree shipped to the lumber yard, bargain to get the tree cut, then have the tree and the pieces delivered. And that's when I began working on that 2-headed snake with him. But I dedicated this piece to him. Again, it's kind of a basket shape, and again, using the reed and the paper. And so that is it. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Nathalie Ferrier. Nathalie Ferrier is a multimedia artist who was born in France and has lived year-round in Truro, Cape Cod since 1999. She teaches fiber arts at Cape Cod Community College, as well as directs the Higgins Gallery program. She studied at the École de Haute Couture in Paris. In 2007, Ferrier received an MFA from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. I would like to also thank Nathalie for all the tireless work she has done, putting together an incredible exhibition program at Higgins Gallery. It's a privilege to be showing with all these excellent artists. And she has done a tremendous job fostering a great community of artists on the Cape. And I'm very, very grateful to be a part of the exhibition. Thank you so much, Nathalie.
Thank you, Bert. It's very kind of you, all these words. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to start with an artist that I love very much. Her name is Betty Saar. And she made that installation that she calls Brides of Bondage. And I'm going to go to the next slide so you will see a little more of the details. So you see a bridal dress floating a little bit like a ghost, and these miniature sailboats that seem to chase its trail. So now if you look closer, you will see that underneath of each boat is basically each boat is set atop a Brooke diagram. And so Brides of Bondage evokes ancestral memories and the fate of women in slavery. So the reason I showed these images and that work is because I like to connect my work to history and culture, and that whenever I create something, I am inspired by many things. And so looking into, I would say, coming to the Cape, I have been looking into the history of the people that have created the fabric of Cape Cod, and have inspired me and helped me to settle here and grow my own roots. So here is my piece that I showed at the gallery for the tie-dyed exhibit. So I started creating this installation after I heard about the schooner Ernestina Morrissey. So the Ernestina Morrissey was the last fishing schooner, and on her first voyage, she brought back 200,000 pounds of fish. Among many trips around the world, she sailed to Greenland in 1926 and to the Baffin Land in 1927 for the American Museum of Natural History. During the 1950s, the schooner became a packet ship crossing the Atlantic to Cape Verde with cargoes of food, clothing, and blankets, and returning to America with Cape Verdeans until she fell into disrepair in the late 1960s. So in 1977, the ship was given to the United States by the Cape Verdeans and designated as a National Historic Landmark. Ernestina is owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So the schooner is still undergoing restoration in Booth Bay, Maine, but she will return to Bourne this summer and will be used as an educational research vessel by the Massachusetts Maritime Academy. So it's coming very close to us. So now I would like to say that my installation is an homage to the history of the Cape African diaspora. And so my mixed media installation that I started to make around 2007, and I keep changing it, adding to it. It's some kind of an assemblage of materials and recycled objects that I collected, transformed, and combined with various media. Now you will see that that's a detail of a sail with sugar wrappers, but the sail is made out of sail fragments, recycled blankets, found ropes, nautical hardware, plastic bottle caps, and I always use crochet in my work to basically glue things together. And so I chose a line from a French poet. His name is René Char, that reads, "Sail the ship close to its hope," for the title of my piece, because as an artist, I feel that my job is to explore the perimeter of being. And by making art, I escape the pattern that is imposed on me. So the installation and its title, "Sail the Ship Close to Its Hope," embody the desire to set our life's course as close as possible to our own hope. And so that piece that you see here, here is a detail. So it's made from paper that I folded, and then it's crocheted onto that canvas. And so thank you so much for listening, and I'm happy to answer your questions at the end. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and because I would like to introduce my colleague Brooke Mullins Doherty, who could not be with us today, unfortunately, but we will hear of her work in a recording after I introduce her. So Brooke Mullins Doherty creates large wire and fabric sculptures and smaller paintings, prints, and drawings exploring biology, ecology, and identity through an abstract lens. She has been teaching at 4Cs since 2009 and currently teaches history of art, Stone Age to Gothic, and digital photography. She has also taught drawing, sculpture, and 3D design. Brooke lives in New Bedford with her husband and their 3 children. So let's watch Brooke Mullins Doherty's recording.
And I wanted to introduce my sculpture from the Tide show. So my piece Release is one of my many sculptures exploring the forces that shape our lives and our bodies. I'm very interested in forces that we all experience, but that we're not used to looking at physically. I'm interested in the movements of protons and electrons and neutrons inside of our cells. Inside of our molecules. I'm interested in how DNA and its double helix and its instructions for proteins work inside of our bodies to shape our bodies and therefore our destinies. Now, in this sculpture, you can see that the basic structure of the wire frame looks a lot like a double helix. And this is one of the ways that I'm trying to visualize what makes us up as people. And this can connect us as we all share something like 99.9% of our DNA between humans is identical. And that tiny little percent that's different has so much control over our lives. Now, I start with a grid when I'm making sculptures, and I sew fabric over this grid. My grid is made of wire, I should say. And this, to me, represents the forces we don't have control over, the parts that determine our lives before we're even old enough to make decisions. But this feels at odds to me with the experience of actually being alive and being able to love and dream and see beauty and experience pain and connection and heartache. And all of these emotions are so very different than what I picture this mechanistic construction of our bodies and our DNA and our smallest parts. And so I take this grid and I warp it. And you can see here the warping of the grid takes the form of a meandering stream. Now, one of the other forces that I'm interested in is water. And like water, this sculpture takes the form of whatever situation it finds itself in. So here in the Higgins Gallery, which is where this picture is from, I've hung the work from in front of the windows. And so I've hung it so that it's suspended and it's moving through space and undulating and twisting and turning. But I've also shown it on a wall. So the same sculpture has been shown many different ways, depending on the environment it finds itself in, or that I find it in, I should say. So I'm interested in what's small and creates forces that act on us. And I'm also interested in a large scale, magnetism, wind, time. All of these forces are things that I want to picture because I want to help us as humans step outside of ourselves and be able to sort of look around into our common destinies and our experiences. So those are the issues that I'm really looking at most closely within my work. But I'm also looking at what connects us. Now, this is a close-up of the sculpture, and it's literally connected by stitches. So I'm very interested in sewing fabric around the wire and stitching it. And when I do this, I'm also thinking about people I love. I'm thinking about my grandmother teaching me how to sew. I'm thinking about loving care of repairing a garment for one of my children. I'm thinking about what connects us to each other, both within individual lives, within memories, within time, and what we can do to provide comfort for each other. So thank you very much. That's a quick snippet of my work.
And so now I would like to introduce Sean Cassidy. Thank you so much, Sean, for being with us today and for being one of the artists in the exhibit. So Sean's paintings are primarily done in oil. His newest series connects the portraits of human rights activists with the aerial map of each person's birthplace to create an interesting dichotomy. Sean Cassidy graduated from the School of Visual Arts in New York City, where he received a Bachelor in Fine Arts degree. He later received his Master's in Fine Arts degree in painting from Central Michigan University. In 2007, he moved to Plymouth, Massachusetts. Currently, he teaches at Bridgewater State University, Quincy College, Cape Cod Art Association, and teaches classes in his studio. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you, and honored to be here with everyone. Let me see if I can share my screen here too with you. So thank you for inviting me to participate in this and be a part of this very interesting body of work from everybody. And it's truly an honor to be a part of this exhibition and this group of artists. And I am humbled to be in this group with you guys. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll just go through the pieces that I had in this show, and then we pull this up here. So hold on a second. Yeah. Is it not? I can't get this to open. There we go. There we go. Okay. Can you guys, that's sharing, right? Correct? All right, that's good. All right, so this is one of the pieces that was in the exhibition. My work, as you heard, is about layering images, and just to give you a little bit of a quick synopsis of like the journey to get to this point is doing my studies and getting my MFA degree and figuring out my journey with that. I came to a conclusion with building my thesis work of the layering of images, and it became a little more of a visual metaphor of conscious self and unconscious self. So it's still embedded in the work here, even though this is more specifically about the connection to place. So when you look in the hair of this portrait, you can see the map of his birthplace. So what I do is I print the birthplaces of each piece, but going back to my thesis, the layering of images became more of a matrix for using a metaphor for the painting itself being a conscious example of like that condition of how we go around and we're consciously aware of things and we're doing things, and then we might drift off in our imaginations if you're driving and you have like a little bit of imaginary thing. So then that's where the background is going on while you're consciously aware. If you're the viewer looking at this, you're looking at the portrait, so you're consciously aware of that. And then when you look at the map, you are consciously aware of that, but then each thing becomes like the unconscious. So it's a metaphor. So that's still embedded in this. But then when I was doing this work for so long, people kept asking me what was the significance of the map. So I finally started making work to connect the map to place. And it made me think about how we are connected to our place. So that's where this series started. And I did a painting of Martin Luther King Jr. For the first one to start the series and connect the map to place. And at first I thought about where you your final destination where you die, and I thought, I don't want to do that, because I just thought I wanted it to be more uplifting and represent what each of these people that I chose to paint would bring forth. And it's more of the the birth and the bringing forth of a new experience, a new human being, a new person. And so I just thought it was more of a positive twist on that, instead of just this ending of sorts. And then it's more also that we're connected to where we're born more than we are where our final destination is. And even if you didn't spend your life there, it's a source of who you are and you're connected to it. So then it's sort of coming through the portrait. It's a little bit of like, it's mapped out literally on your face, even though it's just the translucent, transparent visual experience you see. And then it also just becomes a very interesting visual matrix of elements in mark making, shapes, lines, and the maps themselves. So each portrait becomes an interesting example of that. So, when they're more rural, like you have with this map, and they have a little bit more greens, or some things have a little bit more of a city, and just different types of structures that are there. So it becomes an interesting kind of just purely visual thing for painting and exploring when you're going through that connection of things. And then just to kind of tie it into just a simple kind of anatomical thing, I would try to find a way to even make the map work. Sometimes in the case, not with this one, but with this one, I'll just go jump around for a second back and forth here. That's this is over Louisville, Kentucky, and then the highway is actually becomes kind of an anatomical structure. Besides the fact that you have all these lines and they're sort of accented for the roads and pulling them out, but they also become structures of the person. And for me, the idea of connecting ourselves to place is also this idea of just me connecting and bridging the two parts of the whole series is the actual person and the place, and then just kind of playing around with that dichotomy of actual straightforward kind of traditional portraiture that I've always enjoyed doing, but then taking it to another place and adding another layer, metaphorically speaking, but also visually, and the two together become very interesting to me, and then I think to the viewer, the storytelling that comes behind it. And every time you go through it, it becomes a different type of approach. Like this Rosa Parks is primarily just very translucent. Let me go back, I'm sorry about that. And that this is just a overlay, and most of the map is coming through, so it just becomes like textural. So you do focus on the portrait, but then you go back and forth, you ebb and flow between things. And even with this portrait in particular, what I try to do with each of these portraits is kind of crop in, and in particular with this Rosa Parks portrait, this is from a larger picture, so I cropped in because I wanted to be more zooming in on the face. And all the other works I've done, I like to kind of play around with cropping and zooming in on things so you are more intimate, and it's more close-up interaction for the viewer to really look face to face with whatever portion I'm painting. And also for this particular one, it's just to crop out, show you the number that she had when she had the mugshot here, but not to make the number readable, even though you could probably put it together, but it's more about her expression and the whole story behind, her and getting on the bus and knowing that she's doing something that's making, the beginning of change, and knowing that that's influencing that, and just seeing that in her face. That's what I was very drawn to when I was painting it, and trying to bring that forth in the portrait itself. And the other things are just interesting. It's just the texture of this is mostly just the map with some basic contour line across it. So sometimes the map works advantageously just as a painter, where you're like, I don't have to paint anything. I just need to let the map do its work, and just a few lines. If you should take them apart, it would kind of fall apart. It'd be like sketchy. But then I just like to use the map as a just simple elemental exploration, as well as it being very deep and metaphorical with the connection of all the birthplace of each individual. So it's really kind of a very formal approach to painting, but with just another layer and approach to painting. So if you have any other questions, I'll answer like Nathalie was saying, but that's we escape out of this. That's pretty much the bulk of what this series is about, and from these few handful of portraits here. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Sean. We do have a few people who ask questions. In fact, one of the questions is to all of us. And the question is, what does influence you in creating new pieces? So it's a little vague, but I was thinking it would be interesting if each of us says briefly what inspires us.
Mm-hmm.
Claudia, do you want to start?
Mm-hmm.
So when I started in, no, Claudia, you on? Or
Oh, you have to mute.
Yeah, Claudia, you are muted, so you have to.
Here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Probably a couple of things. Okay, one would be current events. Some event that grabs me and I can't let go of it. And then the other would be just mood, quite frankly. Those two things.
Thank you, Claudia. Sarah, do you want to jump in?
Yes, and not to steal exactly what you said, Claudia, but I got so passionate about the whales because I was going out to Provincetown to take a course with Leslie Dill. We were doing a project on text and image, and there were all of these stories about how few whales are left on our shores. And I'm not going out and saving the whales, but I feel like we have to do what we could do in our own voice. And so I became obsessed and passionate about the whales and just, they kind of permeated my work. So I think, like you say, something that's happening in current events and it just grabs you and you have to do something.
Thank you, Sarah. Alyssa?
Yeah, I would say mostly nature for me, and then also just trying to understand my place in the world and interpret that through art. So often just expressing my insides and trying to make people understand me in that way through my art.
Thank you, Alyssa. Vicky?
Excuse me. Yes, I think I would have to say that most of my work comes from memories, and they could be very recent, or in the case of the work that I had in the exhibition, it could be distant past. But I think everything that I experience becomes a possibility for making an art piece.
Bert?
I would say I think I laid a little bit of it out in just a short time. Obviously, the experience that I had in Africa, living there for a year, was a pretty powerful influence, as well as 40 years of being on the Cape and drawing out in the landscape and building things in the landscape. But also recently, I've had the opportunities to go to Italy and spend a lot of time in Italy and see a lot of the things that all of us have looked at for years and years in terms of the spectacular work that has been done since through the Renaissance, but especially medieval work. And then constantly influenced by my colleagues, my partner, Vicky, and many of the people that are here. And, looking at other work, it's inspiring and can often lead to good things.
Thank you, Bert. So I'm going to say a little bit the same thing. I'm going to say that I get inspired by a lot of things. I would say places are very inspiring to me, people, the stories they tell me, what happens to them, what happens to their world. I can get very concerned, which I think is good. And also, I would say, whatever I read, whatever I see, and it goes back to basically the time I was a child. My mother, who is here, in fact, right now watching, she's always amazed that I can remember things from the time I was a year and a half, and I guess I keep digging and learning and expanding, and so that's what inspires me. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming today and spend this hour with us. And I want to thank very much everyone who has been in this exhibit. And before we close the event, we have another event this week. It's on Thursday, and we also have in the room the artist that will have a very special exhibit this Thursday at 3 at Higgins Art Gallery with a special performance. So that's Robin Joyce Miller, I'm honored to have her as our artist, and we will be celebrating Black History Month with Robin. First with the event in person on Thursday, and the following Thursday, there's a webinar with Robin, and she has a surprise for us. So I would say check our website and join us on Thursday in person, and next week also in a webinar. I would like to thank very much Vanna and the Tilden team for their magic, doing all the technical things in the back. And I hope to see you soon. So thanks again, and see you Thursday.
Thank you.